Do you ever wonder what childhood was like in the 1950s, especially in Britain? Imagine a time right after the war where life was still rebuilding, but there was also this beautiful sense of freedom, simplicity, and connection with the people around you. It's hard to imagine, right? But today, let's take a little journey back and explore the joys and challenges of growing up in the 1950s, a time when children had a unique, nostalgic way of life that we often dream of today. Now, think about a typical British neighborhood during this time. The streets were lively, filled with the sounds of children laughing, playing, and simply enjoying the freedom that many of us today might take for granted. Back then, kids didn't have smartphones or video games. Instead, they spent their time outdoors, playing games with friends and neighbors, and really getting to know the people around them. A big part of what made growing up in the 1950s special was the sense of community. People didn't just live next to each other. They looked out for one another. Kids would often play outside with their neighbors, who weren't just people living on the same street, but became like a second family. Parents knew the other kids in the area, and it was common for everyone to chip in, whether it was sharing food, helping with homework, or watching out for one another's kids. That close-knit neighborhood feeling was something that really stood out in those post-war years. When it came to play, kids in the 1950s made their own fun. No flashy gadgets, no game consoles, just the outdoors and their imagination. From hopscotch to cricket, from hide-and-seek to marbles, kids were experts in using whatever they could find around them to have a good time. They didn't need much to be entertained. A simple ball, a patch of grass, and a group of friends were all it took to create some of the best memories of childhood. One of the games that stood out was Kick the Can. It's such a simple game, but for children in the 1950s, it was a big deal. The neighborhood kids would gather on summer evenings, and the street would become their playground. Everyone would be running around, laughing and shouting, with the streetlights beginning to flicker on as the evening grew darker. The smell of fresh-cut grass and the sound of children's laughter filled the air. It wasn't just about winning the game. It was about being outside, being free, and making connections with others. Let's not forget about the freedom children had back then. Kids in the 1950s were often given a level of freedom that might seem unthinkable today. There weren't any strict rules on screen time or curfews, and kids were allowed to roam the neighborhoods on their own, often without any adult supervision. This freedom allowed them to explore, to find new places to play, and to learn how to navigate the world around them without constant oversight. This was a time when children would ride their bikes to the local shop for sweets, explore the woods, or simply walk to their friend's house without much concern for safety. The streets and the parks were their playground, and they were free to discover, explore, and play until the sun went down. But with this freedom came the feeling of responsibility. Kids in the 1950s were expected to be self-sufficient in many ways. They helped out at home, looked after younger siblings, and had chores to do. Yet, it didn't take away from their sense of adventure and joy. Even the simplest tasks, like running errands for their parents or helping in the garden, became opportunities for them to gain independence. The neighborhood was also a place of learning. You see, kids didn't just pick up knowledge from their school books. They learned from the people around them. The older generations, be it parents, grandparents, or neighbors, had so much wisdom to share. Kids learned about history, traditions, and values just from listening to the stories passed down through generations. Sometimes these stories were about the war, sometimes about the past, and other times they were just funny tales that made everyone laugh. But they were always shared in a way that made the children feel connected to something bigger than themselves. They understood the importance of community, hard work, and kindness. Now, think about the food. Meals in the 1950s were a simple but important part of family life. Most families didn't have the convenience of fast food or takeout, so dinners were homemade, and eating together was a tradition. Whether it was a hearty stew on a cold winter's night or fish and chips on a Friday, mealtimes were an opportunity for the family to come together and share stories of the day. It wasn't about the food itself, but the connection it fostered, the warmth of the family, and the sense of routine. But of course, it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. Growing up in post-war Britain had its challenges. There were still remnants of the war everywhere, the rationing, the shortages, and the rebuilding that had to happen. But even in those hard times, children found ways to be happy. They didn't dwell on the tough times, they made the best of what they had. A simple game of marbles or skipping rope could bring hours of joy. It was this attitude of resilience, of finding joy despite hardships, that really shaped the children of the 1950s. You could also feel the hope in the air. Britain was rebuilding itself, and there was a sense that things were getting better. The country was slowly moving away from the darkness of the war and heading towards a brighter future. There were new inventions, new ideas, and new opportunities on the horizon. People were optimistic, and that optimism shaped the next generation. Children were encouraged to dream big, to think about a future where they could achieve whatever they set their minds to. They had role models in the form of scientists, explorers, and athletes who showed them that anything was possible. In the 1950s, there was a real sense of unity. The country was healing, and the people were coming together to rebuild not just the physical structures, but also their sense of community and identity. The children who grew up during this time became part of this movement. They carried with them the lessons of resilience, togetherness, and freedom, and those lessons shaped the way they lived their lives as adults. Looking back, it's easy to feel nostalgic for a time when things seemed simpler, slower, and more connected. Life wasn't perfect, of course, but there was something uniquely special about growing up in post-war Britain. The freedom to play outside, the sense of community, and the simple joys of childhood are all memories that still hold a place in the hearts of those who lived through it. And it's not just those who lived in the 1950s who can relate to these feelings of nostalgia. As we look at our own world, today, with technology and modern distractions, it's easy to long for the simpler, more connected lives of the past. There's something about those old-school childhood moments that we can all appreciate, whether we lived through them ourselves or not. The idea of freedom, creativity, and connection is timeless. And maybe, just maybe, we can find ways to bring a little bit of that into our own lives today. So, next time you're feeling nostalgic, take a moment to think about the simpler days of the past, when kids had nothing but their imaginations and the world around them to explore. Maybe we can learn a thing or two from the children of the 1950s and rediscover the joy of living in the moment.